Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you're doing okay. It's been a long year, hey? We gonna go over an update here, Mm, and I almost feel like every time I make a video now, I'm saying I told you so, I told you so. But if you all recall that we were talking about entering into this Jupiter alignment right around the same time as a 90-degree alignment with a fictitious object that somehow isn't really there, but every time we align with it, earthquakes start going through the ceiling. So, and it happens every time. And if it would not happen just one time, and then that would throw a lot of doubt into this scenario that we portray, that alignments do cause increased seismicity. You're looking now, though, at the sun, and we are using a special technique to visualize the pinpoint emissions. Those are those freckled dots that flash. They look like little flashing dots of various sizes and orientations. Fermilab calls those pinpoint emissions. They are X-ray and gamma ray emissions along with extreme ultraviolet. The reason why they have all that energy in them is because you're talking about a particle collision. And the particle collisions send off a cascade where neutrons that are accelerated split other atoms, and basically you're describing a fission reaction. But if you notice the patterns set before you, the majority of the freckles, or the dots, the little tiny flashing spots, the majority of those are occurring over the active region at 1 and 2 o'clock. And that's about, the direction, pointing in the direction of this brown dwarf. And then on the downhill side, or the left-hand side, we see fewer pinpoint emissions. We see fewer collisions happening off to the lower left. So that tells me that the highest concentrations are coming in at the 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock position, which would be predictable when you see where we think this brown dwarf is. Running before you is this week's solar flares, of which there were several. Some were Earth-facing, minor flares. We've had several geomagnetic storms. I think we even had one significant one, 7+ on the KP index, which is the measure of the strength of a geomagnetic storm. But basically, as we run through these days of the week, we're trying to figure out, what the sun's going to do next. And as we ventured into the 26th, 27th, we started seeing those collapsing cavities again, where the shadows are racing inward towards the sun and not outward. And generally when that happens, we have flaring activity. So we've had really a significant amount of that collapsing cavities. This picture shows it the best. Look at the 8 o'clock position, and even the 1 o'clock position. You see dark shadows, dark spheres, dark crescents, dark circles racing towards the sun. And we used to think these were actually objects, but they would be huge. They would be the size of small planets, just racing into the sun by the dozens, which we know isn't the case. So we have concluded that these are collapsing magnetic loops, collapsing cavities. When you have a loop, you have plasma that's ejected and then pulled back in due to the magnetic field that makes a loop. And so you have exiting plasma, and then you have plasma that's returning to the sun. When you have a lot of returning plasma, it does create cavities, and when these cavities collapse, it seems like that collapse in itself creates increased compression. And when you compress highly, very hot plasma, you can create fusion and fission, which then triggers or releases extreme amounts of energy, which then affect, anywhere that's near these active regions. So one active region then can disturb the next active region within a minute of one active region going off, triggering a flare. The second magnetic region nearby will do the same as seismic waves, as waves of energy that travel much faster. As these impact these active regions, it then triggers further flares. If we were in an alignment, this is very special what's happening, very rare, and we're looking for more significant 7-pointers. We're looking for more. If you look at the dates on this list that I'm showing you, you'll see that there's a string of quakes and sizable quakes. And the one in Mexico that just happened, they think was downgraded from an 8. But what we're looking at is, at the start of these alignments, we were having, 7-pointers. So then at the end of the alignments, we should also have more 7-pointers. So more are, in fact, on the way. And they will be here in a matter of days. And that's no joke. We're going to have a few more. The other thing that happens during large body alignments, especially with Planet X, is that our supervolcanoes have a tendency to start rumbling. And that's a really interesting research to try to figure out why alignments affect supervolcanoes seismically so consistently and so readily. It's hard to imagine what forces are occurring in the magma chambers that create the earthquakes. But again, I look at it as a pressure cooker, building heat from underneath, and then when you go over to a pressure cooker and you tap a valve, you release pressure. And so if you grab that pressure cooker and start shaking it, you will also create movement in that valve, and you will vent off even more steam. So look at again, motion as being the primary cause of plate tectonic shifts and plate tectonic movement, changes in plate tectonic direction. When the Earth is wobbling consistently over the millennia, and then all of a sudden changes its wobble, then the plates will change their direction, and that's what has happened. And we've proven it, and we showed you that graph. So we go around and check, just the earthquakes that are starting. We have a 6-pointer at 10 kilometers depth this week in near the Kamchatka Peninsula. Again, the Aleutian chain is also reacting, but much smaller quakes. Some of them aren't being recorded because they're too small, but there's still the whole Aleutian chain is active right now. Mexico is the scene of significant earthquake activity right off the coast, and we've seen 8-pointers in this region before, and we think we just had a 8-pointer down there that was downgraded to 7.8. Now, speaking of supervolcanoes, this is the Yellowstone swarm. Some of these blue new quakes are occurring at 2 kilometers depth, which is pretty shallow. Still, we're not getting multiple harmonics at that depth. We're not getting anything like that, but this is what a precursor to an eruption looks like. You have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of quakes. Some of these are harmonic tremors. Some of the harmonic tremors, I'm here to tell you, are not being registered at nearby seismograms, which tells you that it's a water event, and there's a lot of water in this system. But ladies and gentlemen, there are harmonic tremors that are being registered 5-6 miles away from the origins of those tremors. And when you can register a harmonic tremor 5 miles away from the pinpoint source, generally that's magma that's moving. So we got magma moving in Yellowstone. And some of these quakes, like I say, are at 2 kilometers depth. When you start seeing this many quakes, the number you see before you, and the majority of them at 2 kilometers depth, and there's harmonic signatures on all of them, that would be the time to take a vacation away from Yellowstone. I tried to blow this up so you can see the alignments. This is, you can see Mercury swinging through Earth, which creates a very quick and minor changes in Earth, but you know, it's very quick. And in a day or two, Mercury may increase your amplitudes. But aligning up now with Jupiter and the Sun, we got a 3-planet alignment with the Sun. And the thing is Earth is now falling into a 90-degree alignment with that X at the top of the screen. That 90-degree alignment also exerts tidal influences upon Earth. Those tidal influences create slight changes in the path of Earth's orbit. It's like putting a washboard or a cattle guard in the middle of a road. When you go over it, you create a bumpy ride, a rattling, a shake, which then causes the pressure cooker to jimmy a little bit and release some pressure. So that's the most obvious force that you're dealing with respect to alignments and seismicity. But here we have two, and we have the planet X alignment starting and finishing. We have the Jupiter alignment starting and finishing. So you know, notice the southern jet stream is a little more organized, higher wind speeds. We do get, you know, similar wind speeds in portions of the northern hemisphere, but when you're so disrupted by these vortexes that are created, by the way, and we know they're created, we've proven they're created, there's absolutely no doubt, there's no argument. If you look at the data and you study the patterns and you've studied weather for decades, you can tell which low pressure points and high pressure points are artificially created. It's actually quite easy to tell. But, you know, having said that, when you disrupt the flow of the jet streams, you change directions of the airflow, and that can accelerate your wind speed at some portions of that vortex. But the rest of the jet stream may slow down, and so we see more consistent, more higher speeds in the southern jet stream than we do in the northern jet stream. But, you know, 5 years ago, that southern jet stream is what our northern jet stream looked like. It started to split. It started to have hooks. It started to become disrupted, and that's what's happening in the southern jet stream, but has already happened and played out in the northern part. Now, people were saying that we weren't going to have a hot summer and blah blah blah, and you know, in some regions where we got lots of rain, the average temperatures dropped, but we still set heat records in between the rain clouds. When all we needed was 3 or 4 days of direct sunlight, and what happened? We went right back up on the temperature scales, didn't we? So what happens is that we're heating the Earth not via carbon dioxide, but via the sun, and we told you that since Australia was posting record heat, that's kind of like a precursor to our summer. Now, Australia, when they have their summer, Earth is actually significantly or statistically significantly closer to the sun. So the closer you get to an energy source, the more intense that energy gets, which is why we're seeing, and people are saying, parts of Australia are becoming uninhabitable just due to the heat. And of course, they'll blame the heat on anything but the sun. They'll blame it on carbon dioxide. They'll blame it on the desert. Oh yeah, it's the desert next to Sydney, then where the heat came from. It's the desert's fault. Well, that desert's been there forever. So what's different about that desert today that we didn't see 20 years ago, or even 10 years ago? They blame it on heat domes, and domes are created by heat. The domes don't create the heat; they're created because of the heat. It creates high pressure, and it's just a matter of basic physics. You don't get a dome without the heat. So, but they try to attribute the heat to the dome, but actually the dome is created by the heat. So what came first was the heat, and then came the dome. But yet now we blame it on the dome, and when you read about it, it just makes no sense. When you'll see the contradictions. It has something to do with the Pacific Ocean, but there's a heat dome over the central United States. It'll have something to do with the heat dome over Australia, but it has nothing to do with the record warm oceans just to the east of Australia or to the west of Australia. So, they're lying through their teeth. Anybody who studied the weather for long periods of time know they're lying to the teeth. And that brings up the Dave Wigington. I think his name's Dave. Wigington is actually the guy who really started the chemtrail conspiracy. He threw gasoline on the fire, and he deserves recognition for that. I agree with about 80%, 90% of the things that Wigington has said. I don't agree with everything that he's telling you, but I'm not going to split hairs on this video, and I'm not out to tackle or take on or discredit somebody who's worked so hard to bring us very important information. But remember, I said when you have extreme droughts, those droughts are generally relieved by epic record flooding. I do believe I said life-threatening flooding. And what happened in Pakistan was freak. They call it the worst flood in 30 years, but yet they're calling it a 500-year flood. So, I mean, the contradictions are everywhere, and when you see them, you're not being told the entire truth, when things just don't add up. But literally, the heat will kill 10 times more people than the floods. And the heat deaths are being covered up. They are most definitely being covered up. And they're talking about heat deaths now that have occurred in this record heat wave of 2022. That's a global heat wave. But we do see reprieves in some of the rainy areas. When shade is your biggest cooling element, what are you shading from? Oh, you're not shading from carbon dioxide. You're shading from the sun. And when you do, there's a 30 to 40 degree difference between this shade and direct sunlight. But then, when you have increased heat, you have increased evaporation. And when that evaporation organizes and condenses, then you have record rainfall. And some of these floods are just mind-boggling. Places where people used to play as children, or under 10 feet of Colorado River type water. It's insane. But finally, we just want to run down those heat-related reports. Again, thousands of deaths across the world. They're being covered up, and let me tell you how they do it. Generally, if you're elderly and you die from heat in your home, generally they call it natural causes now. They don't call it a heat-related death. In the prison systems, all the prisons are hiding their heat-related injuries and their heat-related deaths. And in fact, a few years ago, one of the Supreme Courts had to order one of the states to divulge the heat statistics related to injury and death. So, I mean, when somebody has to force you to release that kind of information, generally you're hiding something. But you know, I hate to say I told you so, because in my case, when I you know, I kind of predict things that aren't too favorable. But the one thing that we did predict was the increase in the price of protein powder and the price of protein. People are saying that this winter will be the harshest famine-related winter ever seen on planet Earth, that it will affect even the United States. Now remember, we asked you to be careful about what was going to be happening in May. We said that you're going to notice these shortages in May. There's going to be things that are going off the shelves that are not related to hoarding and mass buying of product. There are going to be shortages on the shelf related to supply and demand and a lack of supply. Well, the first thing that went empty was what? Probably the most important thing you could buy at a store: baby formula. So when the most important food product goes empty in May, and we tell you that, you know, what are you going to do when the shelves go empty in May? We had no idea it was going to pertain to infant formula. We really were anticipating more of a broad spectrum shortage, but it hits home. I mean, a baby formula shortage hits home, which is why protein powder is so important. Now, the whey protein has doubled in price since I made the protein powder video. And by the way, there's a protein powder video I have not made public because I don't want to increase competition for that protein powder. I keep buying it every time I get a chance. The pea protein is by far cheaper than the whey protein, but it's not as tasty, it's not as creamy, it's not as sweet as the whey protein. So there's not the demand for it. But you know, for $7 a pound in bulk, that's a great price. Now, we were pricing whey protein at $10 a pound. Okay, so right now you're looking at $20 a pound now. So it's doubled in just 3 months. So what other investor has given you advice on investing and has doubled your money in 3 months, 4 months? Who's done that? And that's what's happened with protein powder. Right now I was in the store looking at 2 pounds of whey protein, $40. $40 for 2 pounds of whey protein. So you can turn around right now and make a profit on your protein powder. But I wouldn't do that unless you have a good surplus. Well, I've been traveling, I've been moving. It's been a very, very hard month, very difficult month, and I appreciate all of your support and your patience. And there is light at the end of the tunnel. There will be a day where I'm settled in, that I have a good place to work on my product. I have a good place to develop things that you know, just I'm in a bad place right now that would even support, you know, the manufacture of certain products and the distribution. But that's all going to change here in a couple of months, and I'm looking forward to having a full kitchen and lots of tile and no carpeting, and I'm looking forward to having the help, and hopefully the saboteurs will not sabotage us so severely. We're getting our mail interrupted. People are opening our products and then sending them back with a mangled box. And I'm getting back mangled boxes all the time. And I don't know how you mangle a box that's marked fragile, but you know, when it's already opened, you know, and you safety seal your Ziplocs with tape, and the tape is cut, And then the product itself, the package comes back. It looks like it's been run over by a tractor. That's not normal. That's not normal. So we're trying to stay and not poke too many sleeping bears with our content, but that's what people are paying me to do. So and supporting me in that regard. So we're going to try to slip you that information one way or another. So until next time, be prepared, not scared.